Have you ever felt like you had to shapeshift just to fit into church? Like you have to wear a different mask depending on who's watching, changing your tone, your style, the way you dress, your whole vibe? Because today we're reacting to Jackie and Preston Perry's honest and raw conversation about code switching in church culture. They're talking about the pressure to perform and the temptation to be someone else and what it really means to be authentically you in Christian spaces. So if you've ever wrestled with this video is for you. But if it's your first time here, my name is Jonathan, and this is Everyday Discipleship, where we help you think biblically and engage culture through a Christian worldview. So before we get started, please hit a like for that YouTube algorithm, subscribe to this channel, and drop your thoughts or questions in the comments as we go. Now let's tune in.
This is why, especially if the Lord has given you friendships or ministry or access to different kind of cultural experiences, you have to know who you are.
Yeah.
You really have to know who you are, because if you don't know who you are, you will shape shift depending on the space you're in.
Absolutely.
Right. And so that's why, like, when I've had conversations with people and they're like, how you could do this with the SBC or da 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 da, how you, I was like, one, you don't understand, it's a temptation to shape shift everywhere.
Yeah.
Because I might go into a predominantly Black space where everybody looks like me, but I don't hoop.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a sense where even I still feel insecure on if my method or if my tone or if my preaching cadence, it obviously still is very much Black church, but I can still feel, because I can't hoop the way that the preacher before me hooped. But it's like, no, I'm me.
Yeah.
Jackie says a lot right here. Jackie just nails something deep here. Even in spaces where you think you should feel comfortable, where it's your own cultural or even racial community, there is still this pressure to perform a certain way. That insecurity, that tension, that's very real. That's not that's not just about fitting in with others. It's even about fitting in with the expectations of your own community. And this speaks to even a broader spiritual issue here, where we can become so focused on pleasing people that we lose sight of pleasing God. The Apostle Paul warns us about this in Galatians chapter 1, where he says, am I now trying to win the approval of man or of God? Because if code switching is driven by the need to please people over God, then that's a red flag. Let's keep going.
Right. But I can also go into another space where you want to change your tone and change your articulation, and you want to code switch so that you receive acceptance. And I think when you move around in different spaces a lot, that temptation is more prevalent to do whatever you got to do to be accepted. And that is exhausting. And I refuse to do it. And that's why I'm like, no, y'all, I'm going to be Jackie everywhere I go.
I love Jackie's refusal here. That honesty, that I refuse to do it. I refuse to compromise. And for believers, this refusal to shapeshift constantly is a form of spiritual freedom. It says, I'm not going to dim my light or change my voice just so that you feel comfortable. Because the gospel calls us to be transformed, not conform to the expectations of man or of culture. Now, I want to preface this because I want to be fair. Not all code switching is bad. There are moments when adapting to the environment you're in is actually a form of cultural intelligence. Paul himself says in 1 Corinthians 9 that I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. That's not compromise, that's contextualization. So let me give you an example. So I grew up in Passaic, New Jersey, right outside of New York City. I was always in Washington Heights or the Bronx or Newark, in different urban environments. And sometimes when I go up to visit my dad and preach in different settings, so my cadence may switch. For example, so if I'm preaching in the Bronx versus a church in the suburbs, I'm not going to change my message, but I may shift my illustrations, I may change my tone, or I even may change my pace. And that's not being fake, that's being strategic for the sake of love. So code switching, when done intentionally and biblically, can actually serve the gospel and allows us to enter into someone else's world without demanding they enter ours first. Let's get a little bit theological here, because this is where like the doctrine of the incarnation comes in. When Jesus came to earth, he didn't shout at us from heaven. He took on flesh, stepped into human culture, spoke the language of humans, and so from that we can take that it's not unbiblical to adapt. It's Christ like, but there is a danger. Now, remember, I said I was going to give you. I want to preface this. I'm going to give some nuance. There is a danger, and this is where I think Jackie is alluding to, that when code switching becomes self erasure, when you start losing sight of who you are because you're constantly adapting to who others expect you to be. And this is why Jackie says that the temptation is more prevalent when you feel like you have to do whatever you need to do to be accepted. And that is exhausting, and I refuse to do it. That is just not emotional wisdom, that's spiritual maturity. Think about it this way. When David came to confront Goliath, they gave him Saul's armor. And when he tried on the armor, he realized that it didn't fit, that it wasn't him, that he didn't need to become someone else to be used by God. And he just needed to be faithful with what God had already gave him. And that's the call for us. We're not called to conform, even to church culture. We're called to be transformed. Now let's keep going, because I think Preston is going to offer his unique perspective and insight into this as well.
That's good.
I'm gonna wear Dickies if I want to.
Yeah.
Unless the Lord convicts.
Yeah, and that's good. And I could talk about this because me and Lecrae, we talked about it on his podcast. I mean, it was a time where Lecrae publicly said, like, man, I got a problem with Preston and Jackie going in and out of spaces, because he felt like, that was when he was going through his whole deconstruction phase. And we talked about this when I was on his podcast. And one of the things that he said that really blessed me, he was like, the Lord had to check me. He was like, because when I actually would peer in and to see y'all in the spaces, one thing that I saw is that y'all never changed.
Correct.
Y'all never switched up. And I think you're right. Like, I think you just kind of have to be who you are. I remember the first time.
Okay. There's a lot there, because this is so true. Lecrae was pointing out that they never switched up, that they always remained who you are. And Preston seems to be pointing out that authenticity is a witness in itself. He witnessed to Lecrae by saying, listen, I'm going to be in all these different spaces. I'm going to go wherever they invite me, but I'm going to still be myself. And when you stay consistent in your identity, your language, your tone, your style, you're showing the world that you are secure in Christ. And I failed at this in the past. But this reminds me of what Jesus said in John 8, that you will know the truth, and the truth is going to set you free. And when you are free in Christ, you don't have to shapeshift for approval. You just need to show up as the real you. Let's keep going to what Preston continues to elaborate on this.
I did a panel with you at the Gospel Coalition, and ironically, I had these slides on the Gospel Coalition stage, and a Black woman was like, "Why you got on the stage with those slides?" I said, "Because they're comfortable."
Yeah,
and I said
they want us to look presentable in front of company.
And I said, God didn't save me from my culture, but He saved me for my culture to reach my culture.
Hello.
I'm not finna go on a stage.
Hold up. I'm about to shout right now. I'm about to go back to my Pentecostal days, because that's hard. God did not save me from my culture, but He saved me for my culture to reach my culture. And what's crazy is that so often many Christians think that they have to reject their culture to be holy. I remember when I first got saved, I was a nightclub promoter from the hood. So I was still very raw, still wearing what I normally wear. And when I started going to the Spanish Pentecostal church, they really tried to make me start wearing suits and tried to make me assimilate to their culture, because they made me seem like I was a pagan by dressing that way. But I wish I had Preston's insight and maturity and wisdom by understanding that God saved me from this culture for that culture in order to go into it and share the gospel, that I don't have to turn into some type of Mormon. Like I don't have to turn into Steve Urkel, that I can be who God made me to be. And Preston reminds us that God redeems our culture through us. And again, this reminds me of Paul because he became all things to all people. And if you know anything about Paul, he would minister to the Jew and to the Gentile. And what we see in Acts chapter 21 and Acts chapter 22 is that we see Paul go back into his culture. He shaved his head to take a Nazirite vow to as a ritual for purification. And he did this, and he even performed some of the ritual sacrifices, even though he understood those things to be obsolete as types and shadows. But he wanted to reach his people. In Romans chapter 9, Paul also tells us that he wished himself to become a curse, that he wished he can be cut off for the sake of the people for the people of his flesh, for his brotherhood, for his own ethnic people that were lost, blind by their religiosity. And because of the lostness of his people, his heart broke. So we need to kind of have this understanding of incarnation theology at work, where God himself, through Jesus Christ, entered a culture to redeem it, and that he calls us to do the same. Our cultural identity isn't a barrier, it is a bridge to the gospel. Let's keep going.
And act like I'm not gonna wear Bugle Boy jeans.
Those are nice though.
Yeah, some of them. I'm talking about the old school Bugle Boy jeans and,
cool.
and little loafers to look to fit in this environment. It's like, no, you invited Preston. I'm not gonna show up like Jake. You know what I'm saying?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was done. Yeah,
because I've said this before. When I get on a stage to communicate, it is not just what I say that God is using. It's who he's saying it through, in the sense of my tone he's using, my physical body he's using. Like God is not just using the sentences, he's also using my cultural history and how it colors the sentences I'm saying. And so to me, I think I want people to honor God's hand on how he developed you. I want people to honor you know what I'm saying? The fact that I came from St. Louis, from a single mother, who had a more sharp and direct way of communication, and she still does, and how that plays a part in who not just what I say, but who I am. Like God is using all of it, like all of it. And so I guess for you, has that been interesting for you then, to be this Black dude from Chicago with a very particular history in apologetic spaces?
Man, God is using all of it. All of it. And it almost brings me to tears, because there was a season in my life, in my ministry, when I first went on staff in ministry, in vocational ministry. I had a church, I had a pastor who was very well-meaning, very loving. I respect him a lot. God used him to help me grow on what it means to be a husband, as a pastor, grow as a man. But there was another aspect where subtly there will be things where I had to tone myself down, where he would even blatantly tell me that sometimes I would be too loud, or I had to dress a certain way, or I had to communicate a certain way, even in my preaching, where it was constricting me, where because again, he was being well-meaning because he wanted me to have a broad reach, but in that there was this erasure that was trying to happen, where it's almost like you can't really be hood Jonathan. You really can't be that Dominican dude from the hood that God saved you from. You kind of have to begin to be whitewashed and be more like what I would say Carlton Banks. And I had to change the way I communicate. I had to change the way that I dressed. I had to change the way that I talked. I needed to polish it in order to win people. And again, he was well-meaning, but I had to learn a lot in order to not scare some of my white brothers and sisters. But at the same time, there wasn't this freedom for me to be me, to use the urban vernacular, even when there were urban people in that setting, because that could have been a way for them to say, man, I see myself. There's a space for me here, not just for my color, but even for my culture. because even though it was a multi-ethnic church, it was still a predominantly white multi-ethnic church. And I love how Jackie highlights that God uses everything about us. He uses our backgrounds, he uses our tone, he even uses our family history to communicate his truth. And I grew up in a Spanish household. I grew up in the hood. I grew up in a very multicultural environment. I was one of five, maybe 4 or 5 Spanish dudes that played on a basketball team. And all my other teammates were black from the projects. Like, so there's this upbringing even in me that understands I know how to navigate multiple spaces, and God is using that to redeem people, because not only did I grow up in that type of culture, I had the privilege of going to Bible college, into seminary, and then being in white spaces, white evangelical spaces. And because of that, it gives me this very wide range. Think of acting. Think of Denzel. Think of Lakeith Stanfield. There's these actors. There's some actors like Ryan Reynolds. They just play themselves. But then you have like Lakeith Stanfield and Denzel Washington, who have this range. And if God gives you the privilege to have this range because you've been in so many different spaces, God can use all of it. That's why he used the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul was a Hebrew of Hebrews, but because he was a Roman citizen, he grew up in a diverse atmosphere. He was able to also reach the Gentiles. He was effective with Jews, but he was also effective with the Gentiles because he was familiar with their culture. And this also pushes back against any idea that we have to be cultureless, that God doesn't see color, that we need to be bland Christians. But the thing is that God calls us to bring our whole selves into the work of his kingdom. So here's the challenge for us all. How do we navigate different church spaces without losing ourselves? How do we honor God's call of being authentic while being wise and humble? And the answer is biblical identity. We don't have to shapeshift out of fear. We need to be rooted in Christ, confident that he uses our full story for his glory. So if you've ever felt the pressure to code switch or to hide parts of who God made you to be, comment below and share your experience, because we want to grow together. I appreciate you rocking with me through this video. If you've gotten any value from this video, do me a favor and smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm and subscribe to this channel. Every week, we're dropping content to help believers develop a strong biblical worldview and walk with spiritual clarity in a world full of confusion. So before you go, check out these next videos that YouTube seems to be recommending. Grace and peace.